Morning my son called to tell me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. The same kitchen where I'd taught him to make pancakes when he was 7. The same kitchen where we'd sat together the night his mother passed, not saying much, just being in the same room because neither of us could stand being alone. I set the mug down, didn't say anything for a moment, just listened to the silence on the line after his words landed. Dad, I think it's better if you don't come. Melissa's family is very traditional, and honestly, it would just make things complicated. Complicated. That was the word he used. 31 years of my life poured into that boy, and I'd become a complication. My name is Bernard. I am 63 years old. I retired 2 years ago after building a small but successful commercial real estate business in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm not a wealthy man by any headline standard, but I've done well. I own my home outright. I have savings. I live comfortably. More importantly, I live with integrity. Something I tried, with everything I had, to pass on to my son. My son's name is Ethan. He was 26 when this happened. Smart kid. Always was. Got his mother's sharp mind and, I thought, her good heart. When his mother, my wife Patricia Ann, died of cancer 8 years ago, it was just the two of us. He was 18, heading into his first year at NC State on a partial scholarship. I covered the rest. Tuition, housing, food, everything. I also kept paying the mortgage on our family home while he finished school because I wanted him to have somewhere familiar to come back to, somewhere that still felt like his mother was in it. After graduation, Ethan moved to Raleigh for work. We talked every Sunday, had dinner together at least once a month. I thought we were close. Then he met Melissa. I want to be fair here, because I've had years to think about this, and I know my own perspective has its limits. Melissa is not a bad person in some movie villain sense. She's just someone who came from a very different world, and she had very particular ideas about how her life was going to look. Her family had money, old, quiet money, and with it came a certain way of doing things, a certain set of expectations about appearance, status, and who belonged in which room. I am a black man from a working-class background in Greensboro who built what I have from scratch. I wear what I feel comfortable in. I speak plainly. I don't perform for anyone. I never felt entirely welcome when I visited Ethan after Melissa came into the picture. Dinners became shorter. Conversations became more surface level. When I asked about wedding plans, Ethan would get a little vague, a little careful. I noticed but didn't push. I told myself it was just new couple adjustment. So when he called me that Tuesday morning in March, I wasn't entirely blindsided, but I was still gutted. Ethan, I said, once I found my voice, I'm your father. I know, Dad. This isn't about that. What is it about? He paused. Melissa's family has certain expectations for the ceremony. It's going to be very formal, very curated, and they're not sure you'd be comfortable. I almost laughed. Not comfortable. In a church, watching my son get married. Did you tell them I raised you alone? I asked. That I worked 60-hour weeks so you could go to a good school? That I drove 4 hours round trip to see every single one of your graduation ceremonies, including the ones where they just handed you a piece of paper and called it a milestone? Silence. Ethan, do you want me there? Another pause. Longer. That pause told me everything. I think it's better this way, Dad. Just for now. We can celebrate after, just the two of us. I said okay. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I hung up the phone, finished my coffee, and sat with it. Now here's something people don't understand about a moment like that. The pain doesn't hit you like a truck. It seeps in slowly, like water under a door. I sat in that kitchen for a long time, and what I felt most wasn't anger, it was grief. The specific grief of realizing that a person you built your life around has, quietly, decided you are less important than someone else's comfort. I thought about Melissa's family having concerns about how I'd fit. I thought about what exactly about me might be considered a poor fit. I didn't say it out loud to Ethan. I didn't need to. We both knew the subtext. Over the next few weeks, I kept a close eye on the financial picture. Because here's the thing about being a father, you don't just show up emotionally. You show up with your checkbook too, and I had been showing up that way for a long time. The wedding was set for mid-May in Charleston, the destination wedding at a historic estate property. Elegant, I'd heard. Expensive, I knew. Ethan's salary as a project manager at a tech firm was good, but it wouldn't cover what this wedding was going to cost. He'd come to me 6 months earlier, and I'd agreed to contribute $40,000 toward the wedding expenses. I had already transferred $25,000 and had the remaining $15,000 set to go out the week before the ceremony. I also carried Ethan on my cell phone plan and had been helping with his car note, a used BMW he'd bought when he and Melissa got serious, one of those purchases that felt slightly out of reach for him, but that I'd helped make possible because I wanted him to feel settled. After that phone call, I didn't stop any of it immediately. I'm not impulsive. I sat with everything. I prayed about it. I talked to my older brother about it. He lives in Atlanta and has always been the steadier one of us. He listened for a long time, and then he said something that stuck with me. "Bernard, a man who is ashamed of you doesn't deserve to benefit from you." I let that sit. The week before the wedding, I called Ethan, not to fight, not to plead. I just wanted to give him one more chance to do the right thing on his own. "Son," I said, "I've been thinking about what you asked me. I want to ask you one more time, man to man. Is there truly no place for me at your wedding?" He hesitated. I heard Melissa's voice in the background, low and quick, like coaching from the sideline. "Dad, we talked about this. It's just how it has to be right now." Right now. As if this was a temporary situation. As if my exclusion from my own son's wedding had an expiration date. "Okay," I said. "I understand." And I did understand. Completely. That same afternoon, I called my bank. I stopped the remaining $15,000 transfer. I had the $25,000 transfer reviewed. It had gone to a joint planning account Ethan had set up specifically for wedding expenses. I spoke with an attorney to understand my options. Some of the money had already been spent, but a portion was still sitting in that account, committed to vendors for things not yet finalized. There wasn't much I could claw back legally, and I wasn't looking to create a financial catastrophe. I just wasn't going to keep funding a celebration where I wasn't considered worth a seat. I also called the BMW financing company. The car note I'd been co-signing and partially paying, I formally removed my automatic payment authorization. That was within my rights. Ethan was on the loan. He could make his own payments. I called the cell carrier and removed Ethan's line from my plan. I did all of this quietly. No announcements. No dramatic speeches. I just stopped. The wedding was on Saturday. I spent that day doing something I hadn't done in years. I drove down to Myrtle Beach by myself, got a room at a small hotel, and walked along the water. I hadn't taken a real solo trip since Patricia Ann died. It felt strange at first, a little hollow, but somewhere around mile 2 of that walk, something shifted. I thought about how much of my adult life had been lived in service of other people. My wife, my son, my business, my employees, all of it worthwhile, none of it regretted. But this was the first day in a long time where I wasn't anyone's resource. I was just Bernard, 63, standing at the edge of the Atlantic, watching the light come down. I slept better that night than I had in months. The call came Sunday morning. I was eating breakfast at a diner near the hotel when my phone buzzed. "Ethan." I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I answered the second time. "Dad." His voice was different. The careful, coached quality was gone. He just sounded young. "Dad, the florist pulled out last night. The remaining deposit bounced because the account balance was short. The venue is saying there's an outstanding balance on the bar service. Melissa is..." His voice broke slightly. "There's a lot happening right now." I sipped my coffee. "I'm sorry to hear that, son. What happened? Did something happen with the transfer?" I stopped it. Quiet. "You stopped it." "I did." "Why didn't you, Dad? Why didn't you tell us?" I set down my fork. "Ethan, when did you plan to tell me that my presence at your wedding was an inconvenience? Because from where I stand, you made that decision and then waited for me to keep writing checks. I wasn't willing to do that." More silence. I could hear him breathing. "I need you to fix this," he said. It wasn't exactly a request. It had a different texture. "I'm not going to fix this," I said. "This is the consequence of the choice you made." He hung up. I paid for my eggs and toast, left a good tip, and drove home. Now, I want to be honest about what followed, because it wasn't clean or satisfying in the way you might imagine. The weeks after that call were genuinely difficult. Word got around family. Ethan had told his aunt, who told my brother, who called me not to lecture but just to check in. The details of what had happened at the wedding reception were patchy and a little chaotic from what I gathered. The event happened but was significantly scaled back, and the energy was apparently not what anyone had planned for. I didn't ask for details. It wasn't any of my business. Melissa's family, I later learned, had assumed I was covering more of the costs than I actually was. When the money stopped, some of the shine came off that assumption. I don't take pleasure in that. I'm just telling you what I was told. Ethan didn't call for almost 3 weeks. When he did, it was a different conversation. Quieter. Less managed. I don't know how to explain what happened, he said. I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible decision. Tell me why, I said, not to relitigate it. I just want to understand. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Melissa's family made it clear that her father was going to be the dominant presence at the wedding. Her dad's a certain type. Very formal. Very particular. And honestly, I was afraid that if you came, the contrast would be... He stopped. You were embarrassed, I said, not angrily, just clearly. He didn't deny it. I told myself it was about keeping peace. But yeah, I think I was. That honesty cost him something, I could tell, and I respected him more for it than I had in a long while. I'm not going to pretend that didn't cut me deeply, I told him. It did. It still does. But embarrassed of what, Ethan? Of how I talk? How I look? Where I come from? No, he said. Of how they'd look at you. Of how I'd feel watching them look at you. I sat with that. There it is, I said. You were trying to protect yourself from discomfort, and you put that above me. Yes, he said, I did, and I'm ashamed of it. We talked for 2 hours that night. Not everything was resolved. Some things don't resolve in a single conversation, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But something real passed between us, something that had been buried under years of niceness and Sunday calls and me not asking the harder questions. I'll tell you what I told him that night, because it's the truest thing I know. Money is the easiest thing I've given you. It cost me nothing compared to the real things. The time, the presence, the decision to stay when staying was hard. If you lose sight of that, you lose the whole point. He didn't say much after that. Just, I know, Dad, I know. It's been 2 years now. Ethan and Melissa are still married. We're in each other's lives. More carefully now, more honestly. She and I have had exactly one real conversation. A dinner at their apartment in Raleigh where we sat across from each other without the usual pleasantries as armor, and spoke plainly. I don't know that we'll ever be close. But I think she understands now that I'm not a problem to be managed. I'm his father. I was here before she was, and I plan to be here in the ways that matter. The car, the cell plan, the financial support, none of that came back. I made clear it wasn't a leverage play. I simply restructured my life to reflect my actual priorities. Ethan got a new phone plan. He handled his car note. He figured it out as adults do. And me, I booked another trip to Myrtle Beach the following spring. Found that same diner. Left another good tip. I've started volunteering at a mentorship program in Charlotte for young men who've aged out of foster care, boys who don't have a Bernard in their corner. I go on Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings, and I can tell you honestly that it is the most purposeful I have felt since I built my first business deal at 34 years old. One of the young men I work with, 19, sharp as a tack, reminds me of Ethan at that age, asked me a few weeks ago if I had kids. I told him I had a son. He asked if we were close. I thought about it for a moment. We're getting there, I said. We're doing the work. He nodded like that made sense to him. Like he understood that closeness isn't a given, even between fathers and sons, that it's something you build and rebuild and sometimes have to tear down to the foundation before you can put it back upright. I think he's correct. I think that might be the most important thing I've learned in 63 years, that love without honesty is just habit. And I'd rather have a hard truth between us than a comfortable lie. Ethan called last Sunday. We talked for 40 minutes. About nothing important. Sports, a book I'd recommended, a problem at his job he was working through. At the end of the call, before we hung up, he said something he hadn't said in a long time. Love you, Dad. I said it back, and I meant every word. There's a moment I keep coming back to, standing at the edge of the Atlantic that Saturday, shoes off, water cold against my feet, while my son was somewhere in Charleston getting married without me. I didn't feel angry in that moment. I just felt the weight of what it costs to love someone correctly, and how rarely that gets recognized until something breaks. What happened between Ethan and me didn't come from nowhere. Looking back now, I can trace it clearly. Not in a bitter way, more the way you trace a crack in a wall back to the original shift in the foundation. He'd been making small choices for years that I let slide because I told myself it was just growing pains, just the natural pull of a new relationship. But choices compound. Every time he chose comfort over honesty, every time he let Melissa's family's opinion outweigh his own sense of right, he was building toward that phone call. And every time I kept writing checks without asking the harder questions, I was making it easier for him not to face what he was becoming. That's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop catching someone before they fall. Not because you want them to suffer, because a person who never faces the consequence of their own choices never actually develops the moral backbone to make better ones. Ethan was a smart young man, but intelligence without the willingness to do right, without the courage to stand for something when it costs you something, is just cleverness. And cleverness alone doesn't make you a good son, a good husband, or a good man. I think about what it took for him to say, 2 months later, "I was embarrassed of you." That took something real. It would have been so much easier to blame logistics, to blame Melissa, to blame the wedding stress. He didn't. He looked at what he'd actually done and named it. That's not a small thing. That is the beginning of character. It doesn't undo the hurt, but it opens a door that a comfortable lie would have kept permanently shut. I'm not a perfect father. I spent years using financial support as a proxy for presence in ways I wasn't fully conscious of. Making sure the tuition was covered, the car note was manageable. The wedding was funded, all real, all necessary, but not the same as sitting with my son in the hard conversations, asking about what kind of man he was trying to become. I had to reckon with my own part in what we'd built between us. What I know now is that integrity isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's just the long, quiet accumulation of choosing what's right when it costs you something. Your comfort, your convenience, your son's approval. I walked away from that wedding without begging for my seat. I stopped the money without a speech. I answered his Sunday call without making him grovel. That's not strength in any dramatic sense. It's just a decision, made over and over, to live as the man I actually want to be. Ethan and I are still building, still learning how to be honest with each other in real time rather than in hindsight. Some weeks are easier than others, but every Sunday call, every 40 minutes of real conversation, that's what I worked my whole life for. Not the money, not the wedding. This.